my first grade friends. Unfortunately, we won't get to work on our lunar landers for a couple of weeks, but I do have Go for the Moon, A Rocket, a Boy, and the First Moon Landing by Chris Gall. If you've read Dino Trucks and Dino Trucks Returns, or The Return of the Dino Trucks, Chris Gall is the author of those books. And I am also, hopefully you enjoyed your nonfiction text about Katherine Johnson, and I will be sharing more about Katherine Johnson later. The moon is out tonight. In the morning, 3 brave men will climb inside a giant rocket, blast off into space, and fly to the moon. And for the first time ever, people will try to walk on it. I'm so excited that I can't sleep. And you can see here, he's created his own lunar lander in his bedroom. The astronauts are ready for the mission, and so am I. Weeks ago, I started building my own rocket. It is small. I had to read the instructions very carefully. Everything has to fit together perfectly, or it will not fly. Our television screen has no color, only black and white. The picture jumps and sometimes it looks like snow. The reporters said that the astronauts are preparing carefully. They will need a huge amount of thrust to leave Earth. Because Earth has so much, starts with a G, gravity. They need lots of thrust to be able to get off the Earth. Thrust lifts the rocket off the ground and away from Earth's gravity. The heavier the rocket, the more thrust is needed. The main engine on the moon rocket provides 1.5 million pounds of thrust. That means the engine is able to lift 1.5 million pounds into the air. But the rocket to the moon weighs 6.2 million pounds, or as much as 400 elephants. So it will need 5 engines to lift off the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The giant rocket will take the astronauts to the moon is called the Saturn V. It is 363 feet tall, and they give us an idea of how tall it is because there's the Statue of Liberty. After I built my rocket, I practiced jumping to see how far away from the ground I could go. I'm using thrust to jump into the air, but Earth's gravity pulls me down. The Saturn V rocket has 3 sections, or stages, stacked together. Each has its own set of engines and functions as a separate rocket. When a stage runs out of propellant, it will be left behind, making the Saturn V lighter. A lighter rocket needs less propellant and can fly farther with its payload, which is the astronauts, their spacecraft, and their moon lander. When the first stage runs out of propellant, it is left behind to fall into the ocean. So here's the first stage. Boom, they left it behind. The same thing happens to the second stage. The third stage takes the payload and pushes it to the moon. At the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the stages are stacked together in a huge building with the help of a giant crane. The crane can lift 500,000 pounds, or the weight of 30 large bulldozers. The person who operates the crane has to be very careful. In order to qualify for the job, they have to prove that they can lower a practice section onto an egg without cracking it. So here's the egg. They're lowering the practice section onto it without cracking the egg. Months before, after it was assembled, the Saturn V was moved to the launch pad. A giant machine called the crawler was driven under the rocket and the launch tower. It moved very slowly. It took about 6 hours to move the rocket 3 miles to the pad. So 6 hours is like your whole school day, almost your whole school day. And so it took the whole school day to move this 3 miles. 3 miles can be run or walked in about an hour. So this thing moves slower than people walking. I transported my rocket outside to the launch pad. My rocket is little, but I still have to be careful. The Saturn V engines create thrust by burning the propellant. The hot gases shooting from the giant nozzles will lift the rocket into the air. The engines do not burn gasoline like a car, but a mixture of kerosene and oxygen in the first stage. So here's kerosene and oxygen. Here's the rocket body, and these are the engines. So those mix and propels it. The upper two stages burn oxygen and hydrogen, a very light, very explosive gas. So here's oxygen, and here's the hydrogen. That is why we wouldn't use it in cars, because it's extremely explosive. My rocket uses water as a propellant. I filled the tank with water, then I pumped the rocket full of air. When the air is squeezed, it is called compression. The compressed air will force the water out to provide thrust, and then the rocket will lift into the air. Air, water. On the morning of the launch, I have a good breakfast of eggs and bacon, my favorite orange drink called Tang, and my favorite orange drink called Tang. It is getting close to countdown. I need to get my little astronauts on board. The Saturn V astronauts have their own breakfast early in the morning. Then they are sent to a special room to get into their spacesuits. They need help. The special suitcases they carry will give them oxygen to breathe until their capsule is safely in space. 3 hours before liftoff, they ride to the launch tower and they take the elevator